Is behavior genetic? Are bad people just genetically bad people? Is that what it is? Or is it the environment? I think there's been two separate schools of thought on that. And they're still fighting, by the way. They are still fighting. But let me give you my take on the whole thing. To believe that behavior is genetic would be then to judge and condemn people who we deem to be genetically defective and doing bad things, let's say. For instance, let's say if murderers were found to be genetically defective in some way, so then we're going to have murderers who are born into the world predisposed to murdering. No single thing or study has ever been found that would in any way, shape, or form lead us to believe that genetically we are predisposed to be in any certain way. As far as we know, we are born into the world like a clean slate. I would say look at any newborn in any nation, anywhere, and you would find it is the exact same spirit. It is the exact same baby everywhere. To me, all newborns are the same. All 1-year-olds are the same. All 2, 3, 4-year-olds are the same. They carry the same spirit, the same innocence. They carry the same beautiful qualities that children have just before they start getting tainted. They all have the same wonder about the world. They all have the same sense of wanting to discover. They all have the same degree of trust, blind trust, right? Children trust, which is why it is so easy for us to manipulate them. They believe anything we tell them. Why? Because they are not tainted. Because they are born innocent. But we know today that children begin learning about the environment, about themselves, pretty much just as soon as they are born. They learn through touch, through sight and sound. Babies don't speak any language yet, but they communicate. And babies are programmed to do one thing. Human babies are supposed to do one thing efficiently and effectively. And that is to generate compassion in the caregiver that's supposed to be looking after them. Very simple reason. They say in nature, there is no more a helpless young than the human baby. The human baby cannot do anything for himself. Needs 100% care by a caregiver. This baby learns about the environment and about him or herself through the caregiver. The way the caregiver responds, the way the caregiver attends or not, touches or not, even the amount of time for skin-to-skin contact between the baby and the caregiver. All of these things we know today, science tells us, all of these things are tools by which the baby learns about himself and the environment. Now, if a baby doesn't receive proper care, even when it's 5 days old, even when it's a year old, when baby doesn't receive that care, when a baby cries and no one comes to help, when it's in agony and no one attends, it begins to receive a message. This message within that, one, either I'm not worthy, good enough, nobody cares about me, the world is a bad place, but this 5-day-old or a 1-year-old still cannot speak, right? But they communicate and they feel and they learn. We seem to only care about children really when they begin to express themselves verbally, right? Oh, we can talk to them, now they understand something. No, babies understand right from day one. They sense far more than we can because they are far more pure and open. They can sense the environment and they understand. There was a near-death testimony from someone who said when he died on the operating table and he found himself outside of his body and he was in a different realm, that he went through what was called a life review. His entire life rolled in front of him like a movie. And it started from when he was in his mother's womb, what he was sensing. It happened that his father was beating up on the mother while she was still pregnant with this person. And what he said was, he said, I recalled feeling the blows every time that my father hit my mother. And she sensed the anxiety, and I did too. And for years after that, when he was born, he didn't know why, but he didn't trust people easily. He was always on his toes and he was always... But after this life review, he knew why, because he thought the world was a dangerous place and people were not to be trusted. The point I'm making is this, that children are like sponges. They absorb everything. And although they don't communicate verbally, but they are fully ready and fully open, and every ounce of every bit of information through the environment travels through them, and it forms a response within the baby's brain. The baby's brain is collecting information constantly and is storing responses and is forming the necessary framework within which this baby is going to be growing in the world. You know, we talk about people's habits, etc., etc. There's one interesting study about addiction, the roots of addiction. Again, we judge people who are addicted in various different ways. God knows all of us have our own addictions. Somebody's a workaholic, somebody's some other holic. But they find the roots of these addictions in those early stages of life. Dr. Gabor Mate in Canada was an expert on addiction. He was talking about his own addiction, and he was recalling when he was a baby. He is from, I believe, Romania, if I'm not mistaken. In 1944, the Germans rolled into Romania in an effort to gather up all of the Jewish families and send them to the ghettos and the concentration camps. And this Dr. Mate was probably, I don't know, a couple of months old at the time. So his mother picks up the phone and calls the family doctor and says, "Doctor, come over, my baby's crying." And the doctor says, "You know what? All of my Jewish babies are crying." And Dr. Mate said, "Do you think this is because the babies knew about the war and the Germans and being Jewish?" No. They were picking up the vibes in every Jewish household. These people were nervous and scared, and the babies were picking those up. And they were feeling stressed, and they had anxieties. Ultimately, when he grew up, he developed his own addictions, and he explains it was shopping, but in any event, he understood the roots of addiction. Going back to, behavior. Addiction is a behavior. The reason why we are certain ways, for which we even judge ourselves, by the way. We see these things as a weakness, right? So this is a question of character. So a person with an addiction has weak character. They have bad moral judgment. But what if this was actually something that had to do with a time they had no control over anything? and this was instilled into them as a response, how can you judge them for that? How can you judge a 10-day-old, newborn? How can you judge a 1-year-old? How can you judge a 2-year-old? Alcoholism has roots in those days. Many negative behaviors and patterns have roots in those days. So going back to, behavior being genetic, absolutely not. It is not genetic. No, we come into this world ready for love. Dr. Bruce Lipton said, he has a book titled similar, Made for Love, something like that, that we come into this world expecting compassion. We are machines that come into this world to elicit compassion in the caregiver so they could then elicit compassion in us. We're supposed to have this warm, nurturing relationship with ourselves, with the caregiver, therefore with everybody else in the world. This is what's supposed to happen. But we know that that doesn't happen. But the knowledge that it doesn't happen is showing us what? Is showing us what is the right way. The right way is the compassionate way. The right way is to attend and to care and to love and to nurture. This is what we're supposed to do. This is one of the reasons why I find it difficult to understand why people would judge anybody. Going back to this near-death experience testimony, when someone said there is no judgment on the other side, I think it's easy to understand why there is no judgment on the other side. Why you are not judged for whatever wrong you did. Here is why. Because you came into this world as an innocent baby. And then through circumstance, you were supposed to end up a compassionate, loving, nurturing, good, caring person. This was the natural path. But because your parents didn't know, or because of the circumstances, or because of their own experiences and wrong upbringing and their ideas about children, you ended up being put on the wrong path. They say you are being put on a trajectory, which is true. A lot of troubled kids, for instance, now we know through studies that children who don't have the right environment, they don't do well in school. And there is a reason for that. It's not because they have any cognitive issues. It's not because they have bad personalities. Now we're medicating our kids with drugs that are supposed to treat psychosis. 75% of Ritalin is dispensed here in the States to kids. 75% of the production on our planet. And we find ADHD. The funniest, this defiance disorder. What is a defiance disorder? Kids have defiance disorder now, and we have to give them a medication for that. So they disagree with whatever it is you're doing. So that means they're defiant. So now, if the police stop you for no good reason and you resist, you have defiance disorder, do you? Or if there's some unlawful thing happening, do you have defiance disorder? Going back to behavior, behavior is not genetic. It's all environmental. And we shouldn't judge people, and our children especially, because of all of the wrongs that we do to them. I think we should take a step back and understand. Life is about love and compassion. If you have kids, they are your number one priority. There is nothing more important. I don't understand about people having kids and then leaving them with the nanny, going off to work, or, daycare at 3 months. I don't understand that. Why did you have kids to begin with? So we need to focus attention on the next generation if we want to stand any chance of correcting this course. Unless we're happy with what's going on. We produce dysfunctional people, produce murderers, monsters. I mean, look, where did Hitler come from? They didn't import him from another planet, I assure you that. Hitler, in fact, grew up in a household where his father mercilessly beat him and his mother constantly. He was an autocrat. He was dry, tough. He was nothing to do with compassion whatsoever. And Hitler hated his father. And then you think about, how did we end up with someone who was so familiar with violence? Because he was taught violence. That was his environment. You know, he wasn't a compassionate, caring person because that's not what he was taught. People speak the language that they are taught by their parents, right? A baby born in China today will learn to speak Chinese. But if you take that baby to Argentina and have the baby grow up within the Argentinian family, that Chinese baby would look Chinese, but will speak the language in Argentina and behave like the rest of the family. Because we learn that. Now, you can't condemn that baby for not being Chinese. So, once again, and underline and underscore and exclamation and all of the good things, we can't judge people. We have to understand them and stand in their shoes with compassion. Step away from judgment because it does no good whatsoever. But understand people, understand that it is probably, most probably, their environment that has caused them to be who they are. Now, what you can do is to step away from judgment and offer compassion. Maybe they can take away a lesson that, oh, maybe there is another way. Maybe I can stop judging myself. Behavior is taught to babies, but that's not the only time we learn. Behavior is always taught. We can always learn. 50-year-olds can learn different behavior. This is how we change. This is how we correct. We may have been put on a difficult trajectory because of the past, but we can understand that. We can accept it. We can forgive it. Now we can choose differently. That is a different behavior.